So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to anywhere in the world. Thank you for dialing in and zooming in. We have a really great program today. My name is Doug Brunke. I'm the CEO and founder of Global Chamber. I'm here at our headquarters in Scottsdale, Arizona, where it was just alluded to that it's a little bit warmer than some parts of the world, and that's just fine with us. We have a hot topic today, and the topic is tips on global project management. So the world is changing. It's more than trade wars. There's all sorts of things going on in the world right now, and so whether you're doing a specific project in another part of the world, or you've actually consider a business development as a project, your life is changing. And so today we have three experts who are going to go through some of the topics and the issues related to that in today's world. And I'm really honored and pleased that Dr. Toby Malichi, who's the founder of the Malichi Group Worldwide, is dialing in as our first speaker today from Indianapolis. Dr. Malichi is on our global advisory board. We really appreciate what he's been able to do there in Indiana with the Indiana District Export Council, a long career in corporate America, including General Motors. He's on the District Export Council. As I mentioned, he's really a predominant expert on trade in the United States. And so, Dr. Toby, we're really pleased to have you today kick off the conversation with how trade realities are impacting global project management and deals. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Doug. What an honor and a pleasure to be here. As Doug said, I'm Dr. Toby Malichi, founder of Malichi Group Worldwide here in Indianapolis. And it's my honor to be here. I'm somewhat embarrassed by that great, overly generous introduction. I thank you by that, Doug, but I can't blush, so we'll move forward from there. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to come at you from the eyes of a small and medium-sized enterprise, and then we're going to come at you in a broad sense, and then during question and answering period, I'll break it down to a more specific topics and answer your direct questions. I titled my subject matter here today for the few minutes here, How Trade Realities Are Impacting Global Project Management and Deals. First and foremost, in my view, there are new frameworks coming for trade, doing business globally, and free trade agreements. Yet they have not yet been clearly defined. There will be an increase in global private-public partnerships and collaborations, e.g. foreign direct investment. There will be an empowering of the private sector, especially small, medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, and their need for growing globally, access to more markets, and in order to facilitate economic growth for job creation, prosperity, and business for peace in an increasingly, and hear me clearly, competitive, disruptive, and innovative-driven global economy. The strategic imperatives for multinational SMEs, investment groups, and private sector global business leaders starting our 38th year in business has never been more prevalent today in today's trade realities. And what I mean by that, in terms of managing your global projects, your trade deals, and navigating the challenging global economy in a geopolitical world amid an interconnected world. Everything we do now is interconnected. These are both exciting times to be in trade, and yet challenging and confusing times. When I was an executive at General Motors Corporation, the #1 car division, we used to have a saying. That saying was, the only thing that is constant is change. And change that we've been going through in the trade industry for the last couple of years. Here are just a few tips to help you position your company to management global projects and deals. Tip number one, we use, do you have specific written down goals, with deadline dates and milestones for achieving those goals. Be intentional. In today's global realities, your company now has to be positioned to be intentional. More about that in the Q&A. Tip number 2, do you have a way to assess or evaluate your projects or deals utilizing a trade benefit survey for closing more deals and getting paid? Here's an example that we use. Be glad to share it with you. It's our trade benefit survey, and we have on that different questions. And we ask, like, number 1, does your company manufacture a product or have the rights to manufacture a product? 2, does your company produce a service or product? And this, it goes on, is your company ever exported or imported, or are you advanced in trade? And then we have an appearance of a global needs assessment on the back. And this is very important right here in managing your global projects. What are your global needs? Do you have a way of assessing your global needs? And secondly, then point number 3 that we use, are you holding in-house trade roundtables? Roundtables, if framed correctly, in essence, will create an environment for a global thought spot to discuss openly among your employees, your staff, your executive team, your prep. Prep for us is called potential risk for export profitability. And is your company trending with your industry? Tip number 4, you have a process to recognize 4 types of deals, the 4 types of deals. The 4 types of deals, and these are these are ours, what we're guided by in doing this. But number 1 is probably the most one that I'm sure all of you at one point either have, or I guarantee will have, these type of deals. And that's the deal gets you so excited, you're so motivated. This is going to be the deal to launch your company into other countries. This the deal is going to get you new customers. You're going to develop new business. You're going to get paid more contracts. The potential partner, potential client is excited about doing business with you. And then they show high interest, then stops. They show high interest, then stops. You can figure out the acronym later on that. Deal number 2, we call it the unicorn deal. We've been in those, I'm sure you have too. That's the deal where you go out, you may do your first deal, maybe your second deal, and you strike it rich. You might make $1 million, $2 million, $4 million, $5 million, 500,000, 800,000. It's all relative. And then what you have a tendency to do on other projects, you have a tendency then to drop your guard, because now you're successful, you're the talk of the community, and your business is doing well, your employees love you, and all is good, life is good. But a unicorn deal is a one-time deal. Number 3, deal killers. This is what I've seen over 38 years, the deal killers. Remember this, time kills deals. We'll be back to you in 30 days. We'll be back to you in 45 days. We'll be back to you in 5 days. We'll be back to you in 10 days. So on and on and on. Remember, time kills deals. Arrogance, jealousy, and money also will kill your deals. And number 4, no deal. No deal comes from corruption, cons, scams, not really dealing with, and this is a very important one, not really dealing with the key decision maker. We also use a number 5, we'll go and are you capitalizing on best practices in your industry? Best practices could be, and this is general for all businesses, regardless of your size, magnitude around the world, where you do businesses at. Number 1, due diligence. Imagine your projects and your deals, you cannot do enough due diligence. Due diligence, due diligence, due diligence. Number 2, know before you go. Know before you go. Number 3, prep. What is your potential risk for export profitability, your goals? Are you familiar with the country, the culture, what you do in business? And number 4, connections, or your connections. And number 5, what is do you have a fail-safe strategy? We'll talk about that more in the question and answer session. I will stop there, Doug, and leave more questions or answers for the Q&A. And my favorite words are, have a successful day and think globally.
And think in acronyms too. There were so many acronyms and so much packed into that conversation. We're going to have to circle back because I couldn't write them down fast enough. So thank you, Dr. Toby Malichi, an amazing project leader, amazing global person, and a great way to kick us off today. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Brad Cartier. He's project director at Goldratt Consulting of North America. Brad, I personally have a background in theory of constraints, and Brad lives it every single day. And those of us that have touched that and understand how that works, I think we realize that it adds a lot of value to a lot of different projects. And so, Brad, you do some really extraordinary work. You've worked at companies like 3M and Medtronic and the Army and the Navy, Boeing, P&G, anybody that we've heard of. Just really extraordinary work that you've done. And today you're going to be talking about theory of constraints for global project management. Thank you for being our second speaker.
Well, thanks, Doug. And I think this is a perfect segue because now that Malichi has showed you how to get the project, now I'm going to try to do everything I can to show you how to be successful with the project. And so for those of you who don't understand theory of constraints, just a quick primer, Dr. Goldratt developed a thinking process that said most all organizations are limited by one or maybe two, but certainly a few constraints within an organization. And now what I want to do is talk about how you look at the constraints within a multi-project or a project organization. And generally how we do that and how we go about it is we look at the undesirable effects. And I think everybody can agree that there's 3 undesirable effects for most projects. 1, they take too long. 2, they go over budget, or even in the budgeting process trying to get that global project, the budget is so high that you've costed yourself outside of what the customer is willing to pay. And so now that cost is too much even going to your customer. Also, frequently they underdeliver or short the scope. But if you think about these things, again, these are the effects. And so what I wanted to do today is take a little bit of time and talk about what causes these external effects. But I also wanted to just briefly talk about how this impacts the company and the people within the company, because it's really the people that drive the business. Certainly when projects take too long, it hits the income streams, and certainly any profitability projections and anything any company might have made to a board of directors, even if they're publicly held. We also know that when projects take too long, it jeopardizes the relationships. Certainly so does cost overruns and under-delivering on scope. It starts to jeopardize relationships with groups you're handing it off to, or certainly your customers. So it's imperative that we limit the effects of these 3 project predictions. And more importantly, as the relationships start to get jeopardized from you and your customer, you start internalizing that, and then it starts to jeopardize the morale within the organization. And these are the types of things we want to kind of get away from. We want to start focusing on what can we do to ensure personal success, as well as how that will lead to business success. And when you think about it, it starts right off the bat, just with looking at people who are involved with projects. So when you think about when you ask somebody what's going, how long it's going to take them to work on a piece of the project, look at the 2 things that are probably most key to their success in the organization. 1, they want to be seen as competent within the organization, and secondly, and as much, they want to seem as reliable. So now think about the impact on this when we're planning our projects. I want to seem competent and reliable. So Jimmy comes into me and says, Brad, you've been great on these other projects. I want you working on my project. Now, how long is it going to take you to do this task? Am I going to go, Jimmy, I'm pretty good. I bet you I can get that done in 2 weeks. Or am I going to go, well, wait a second now. I know frequently I don't get a full kit. I got to go back and forth with the tasks upstream by the time it gets to me. Frequently, I'm not just working for Jimmy. Other people are imposing their priorities on me and all these other things. And I want to be seen as credible. So do I give them a 2 or 3 week time frame, or do I give them 6 or 8 weeks? And most likely I'm going to protect myself. So I'm going to say 8 weeks. right? Because I know there's going to be all of these things that happen and impact me, and I want, again, to seem reliable. Well, now more importantly, just think about how that extrapolates across all of the tasks if we all exhibit this behavior. And more importantly, the project manager knows frequently projects finish late. They have to cut scope and everything else. So he's going to actually extend it even more. So now he's like, okay, well, my whole project is about 8 months. I better tell the bosses 10 months. I better tell the customer 10 months because that way I know for sure we can deliver, right? So now what we've done is we have purposely elongated the whole project. And that's one of the things I think we really need to focus on in delivering projects is we have to eliminate protection at the task level. So one of the big reasons for this is it drives a lot of the bad behaviors that exist in an organization. So as more and more projects get longer, there's pressure to get more projects done. So we shove more projects into an already full system because we need to increase profits. Yet all that really does is induces more multitasking. And I'm here to tell you, if the one thing you take away from my presentation today is my belief is multitasking is the #1 killer of projects in any organization. And now I want to talk briefly about what drives that. First of all, lack of full kit frequently drives bad multitasking, right? So multitasking and due dates, they both kind of drive the same behavior, right? So if I'm measuring somebody to a due date, and that's the primary metric, I'm going to do everything I possibly can, but when it comes to the due date, I'm going to say it's good enough and pass it on. Now, the reality is frequently it's not good enough. And now I'm multitasking because I'm going back and forth to the upstream guy who's just fed me, well, for lack of a better phrase, a bit of crap. And we're going back and forth and they're multitasking because they thought they were done, but they really weren't. And so now we're going back and forth for me to actually complete my task. This is why I said it was going to take 8 weeks. I knew this was going to happen to me, right? And the other problems with due dates is they encourage some other bad behavior, namely student syndrome and Parkinson's law. For those of you who don't understand, Parkinson's law basically says time or the work will fill the time available, right? So if I know I've got 4 weeks, I got all these other priorities, I'm going to maybe take my time, or I know I've got 4 weeks to do this and, oh, good, because it really only looks, when I look at this, only about 2 weeks worth of work. So now I can go to Jimmy's soccer game and Mary's lacrosse game and, I won't work overtime because I've been getting hammered the last 2 months. And now I've actually got some work-life balance to put back in here. And certainly if I'm coding or other things, and I know the code's going to go out in the universe forever. If I'm done in 2 weeks and I don't have to turn it over for 2 weeks, I'm going to kind of polish that a bit, right? Because I know this is going to have my name on it and it's going to be out there forever. And the other thing that drives, this Parkinson's law is the same thing as my credibility. If I told you 4 weeks and I'm done in 2, I'm not giving it to you in 2 weeks for one key reason is next time I say 4 weeks, what are you going to say? Brad, I know you said 4 weeks, but you do it in 2. You're great. So I'm only going to plan 2. And now the next time I deal with it, guess what? I don't have full kit. I am multitask. I've got 3 other things on my plate. And now I'm not hitting the 2 weeks, and I really did need the 4. So again, there's a lot of these things that kind of drive bad multitasking. And certainly from a full kit perspective, I strongly, strongly recommend, I think it even ties into Dr. Malichi's things, is you need to full kit your phases of the project, streams of the project, task to task, especially key tasks. What is the full kit? And don't be driven by a due date. Make sure that the handoff is really handing over a full kit so that the person can focus and finish and run with it and get it off their plate and get on the next task. So again, to kind of drive out some of these undesirable effects of late projects and over budget and under scoped and everything else, eliminate multitasking as best you can. The 2 ways to do that is really reinforce full kitting and really reinforce getting as much as you can due dates at the task level. Let me be clear on that, not the project level, the task level. So I don't want to be driving, because the assumption that if I get all my tasks done on time, I'll finish the project on time is it doesn't work. What I'm really going to be looking for and what we do in our process is we say, give me an aggressive but possible duration, and then I'm going to create my critical path. And then I'm going to say, okay, because these are all aggressive but possible, I'm going to take a chunk of time and put it on the end of the project to protect my buffer. or I'm going to put that to protect my project due date. I'm going to have a buffer on the end of it. Now, the big key here is don't ever give that up. I don't care what the customer says, what the boss says. Do not ever give that up. Not if you want to be on time. And now what I'm going to do during the process of the project management piece is as I'm finishing my task on the critical path, I'm going to be updating and, okay, this task was scheduled for 2 weeks, but it took 2 weeks and 4 days. This task was supposed to be 4 weeks. It took 4 weeks and 8 days. So now I'm going, okay, I've already gone about 8 to 10 days into my buffer. Now I'm starting to look at how quickly am I completing my tasks versus how quickly I'm burning up my buffer. And as I see that to be a little unfavorable, this is where I start to get the team together and say, guys, we need to refocus. We're starting to slip faster than we're completing work. Now, looking at the future tasks, what can we do? And more importantly, are there any resources on other projects whose relationship to critical chain complete versus buffer being used up is favorable that I can maybe get some key resources to help get my project back on track? So if you think about it from a theory of constraint standpoint, what I'm saying is my critical path plus my buffer is the constraint of the project. And the whole system's goal now is to subordinate everybody's activity to make sure I hit those durations. And I'm not doing it by due dates or anything else. I'm saying, look, it's how quickly can you focus and finish on this task? How quickly can you get this full kitted and run with it and go with it? And so when you do this, when you do these or use these aggressive but possible durations, you also find that multitasking gets eliminated pretty heavily. Student syndrome doesn't have the time to fall into the play here, and certainly Parkinson's law will never exist. And then when you think about a multi-project environment, what you've really got to do is come up with a process that says, okay, this is the rate at which our system can complete projects. Maybe you've got a major firmware development group that is the main bottleneck of the organization, or maybe it's your testing labs, or maybe it's something else. But knowing what the capacity of that part of the organization is, and now cascading projects in at a nice even pace at which they can be completed, you'll start to see, my experience is we're frequently getting 20, 30% more projects through a company or a system. Frequently with challenging some of the assumptions and really looking at doing aggressive but possible durations. We're frequently cutting project durations by 30, 40%. Recently, I've done a couple of projects, we actually cut it by 70%. They just had a mentality that it takes certain events to take so long. We challenged it, we challenged the supplier and everything else, and boom, we cut project lengths by 70%. So there's some big wins in here if you start looking at some of the human behavior that exists and what organizations and what processes that exist with organizations are driving some of these bad behaviors. You start to eliminate these, then those undesirable effects of late projects, less scope, or cut scope, or high budgets or budget overruns really start to dissipate very quickly. And so from a theory of constraint perspective, always know where your constraints are, get everybody aligned to those, aligned to those things, and full kit, eliminate multitasking, and just go, 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 go. And be very successful to your foreign company customers, and make sure, again, that you have a very successful and global life.
Fantastic, Brad. Thank you very much. Great information, great roadmaps that you laid out there. Dr. Malichi is calling in from Indianapolis. Brad is here in Arizona, based out of Arizona. And Ragnar Schreier, our next speaker, is based in Toronto, north of Toronto, actually. He's a consultant and project manager at the GQI group. He's comes to us through a member IntelliQuest. He has lots of experience working with some tremendous companies in automotive, military defense, oil and gas, chemical and renewable energy. And today Ragnar is going to be speaking about automation in today's project management environment. Ragnar, thank you very much for sharing your time and expertise today with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. And I'm also grateful to say that I'm not working out of the Toronto area right in this moment. I'm in Florida, and it's quite beautiful here. So
it doesn't look like Toronto in the background for sure. Absolutely.
No, the palm trees give it away. Anyway, thanks for the introduction. And, I want to comment on something Brad said as well. The there is a mindset that it's always better to under-promise and over-deliver until you get caught. So I can agree with that, with those comments in the theory of constraints. What I'm going to talk about is the tools, some tips on tools that can help move these projects along and keep them going in the right direction. And automation is nothing new in project management software and project management tools, but we're in a changing world. And a couple of things that automation brings to project management tools is a structure that will allow tasks to be properly assigned by their duration. And so a couple of points I want to make out, some bullet points I'm going to cover, but the success of your project begins with the critical steps and the tasks to those steps being properly listed or defined or identified in your system. And I don't like the term cookie cutter projects, although, because people have pictures in their mind of driving down the street and all the homes look exactly the same. This is not necessarily a desirable thing, but from the planning point of the project, this could be a very beautiful thing. So the first two bullets I talk about are the critical steps and tasks being properly defined and listed in your software or your project management tool, and ensuring that those steps are in the correct order. And this is McDonald's success was founded on this idea of a system, and ISO 9001 and some of the other management system standards define a system as the sequence of events in a logical order that produce a predictable outcome. And that's really what we want with our projects. And so automation and our tools will help that. The next point I wanted to cover is ensuring that the responsible parties are assigned and notified. And that sometimes seems like it's a little bit easier than it sounds. It's really not when you're in a global project. And the assignment piece with global address books and Active Directory is easy enough. The notification, not necessarily so much. If I'm responsible for my part of the project and I'm in Prague, the stuff that comes to me in English really isn't that useful for me and my team. I need to see it in my native language in Czech. And there are project management tools through automation that will auto-translate. And this is a huge thing in global projects now. And I don't mean the Google Translator page, although it's getting better. I was doing some training in China, and this is before the tools that we used could automatically translate literally on the fly. And so I had two screens, and I was reading some things in English and then using the Google Translator page to put on the other screen so that they could see what my intention was. And a couple of times people in the room were giggling, and then somebody, my host, came up and said, that's not what that means. And so, the point is this, that the communication side in the projects, the assignments and the notifications is getting better and better, and through automation, translation is readily available now too. And this leads to better accuracy of the task completion and better understanding. And so with the first three bullets, if you have your critical steps and your tasks properly listed, assigned, and in the correct order, then that leads to better success in keeping your project on schedule and on budget. The other thing that project management tools need to incorporate and do incorporate now and better through automation is the ability to make on-the-fly changes. And as we know that your project is a moving target, and the ability to react quickly and to not be locked down by various tools is also very important while your project is under execution. Dr. Malichi touched on this, and it's also technology is getting us closer to AI in things like project management tools, where we have the lessons learned and best practices at our fingertips. And now through AI, there's some development in these algorithms based on your project and based on the events that are taking place. It's running computation in the background and bringing forward without the need to explore and do research on best practices and lessons learned. And this is a key to in automation of project management tools. Also, and I think this also had come up with Dr. Malichi, was the need to identify risk, both positive risk and negative risk. And so again, through some automation and project management softwares, there are setup that you can use to identify when opportunities to exploit positive risk exist, and to protect yourself and your critical path and your timeline from the negative risks. Last couple of points I wanted to make. Just the security of the project, again, is key, and your project management tools need to deliver concise security to prevent, I don't like the word tampering, but to prevent unauthorized changes to the project, either at the task level or at the entire project scope. Needs to be protected from your competitors, as well as from your own internal people sometimes, that the best intentions sometimes go nicely rewarded when your project goes off track. So my final thoughts here is, above all else, with your project management tools, automation and communication and mobility are the keys. Like many project managers, myself, I do the majority of my work from airports and hotel lobbies. It's very rare to catch me sitting at a desk. I work from my car, and so the ability to be notified in real time, have communication with your team across the globe, and while you're mobile is a key to success in today's project management world. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you, Ragnar. And now we have our Q&A portion. And, of the Globinars we've done, I'd say over the last couple dozen, I don't think we've actually ever been done on time, for the speaking part. And probably that goes to all of you being really good project managers and knowing what the task and the timeline is. So congratulations and thank you very much, because now, for those of you who are watching, please send in your questions. There are a number that already have come in. One question is regarding the task level activity. Each of you really focused in, or seemed to focus in, on how important it is to make that definition and assignment of tasks. The one question relates to more around, in that analysis, how is variability considered, and how do you consider variability? They bringing up Gantt charts and how tasks can be kind of all listed out, and so how do you identify the critical paths? How do you identify where variability might come in, other than just kind of setting a big buffer at the end and kind of eating that up? Are there things at the task level that can be done to make that a more efficient process? Each of you alluded to that, but if you could articulate maybe a little bit more on that, that would answer the question. So either Dr. Malichi, Brad, or Ragnar, please go ahead. Don't be shy.
Well, I'll start just very briefly and allow the other two gentlemen to speak. The issues management is what I would refer to as the variability, and the again, coming back to automation in your setup of your project and your planning, when you have well-defined task dependencies and prerequisites that will enforce or prevent out of sequence events, then your likelihood to stay on track and to minimize what I would refer to as issues, or I call them hijackers. They're hitchhikers, I guess. But again, if your project plan is well set up, your durations are correct, and your task dependencies are accurate, then you can minimize this variability between tasks.
Okay, thank you very much. Brad, I think theory of constraints talks to this a bit, and you alluded to that relative to, you mentioned about a buffer at the end, but probably what you were describing was identifying certainly where the constraint is and keeping a focus on that. Could you maybe explain a little bit more about how you do that?
Well, I mean, obviously we follow what Ragnar had said and really develop a really tight network with true start to finish relationships and things like that. And then when it comes to at least task variation, a couple of things that we frequently do is, one, we list the assumptions of why we felt the task was going to be what it was. We'll list what the exit criteria is for the task, and we'll certainly describe what the full kit is for that task. So we know when we're starting, and frequently, and this is what helps get it driven out when you're not doing due dates anymore. But when we set the criteria for what the full kit is for the task, we may just take one or two individuals, if it's a broad task and there's multiple people working on it, is just say, hey, this thing isn't fully kitted yet. Can we take one or two people and go upstream or go into the organization to find out what it's going to take to fully kit this before we start launching this task and move it forward? So we would actually rather start late with a full kit, because we know we're going to go a lot faster and manage that variation that impacts it much better if we can start with a full kit. The other thing that we frequently do using the theory of constraints approach is we're always asking, what's the remaining duration? So I'm sure anybody who's been involved in a project before and they're looking at all the updates on their project plans, they're 90% complete today. 4 weeks later, guess what? Still 90% complete. You know, what we needed to know 4 weeks ago is what's the remaining duration, and do you see any possibility of us not achieving this in the next 4 or 5 days? What's blocking you? What signature do you need? What information do you need? But if you're 90% complete, great. I need to know what is the remaining duration and what can we do to make that remaining duration even shorter. So that's a big key thing, or that's a key thing as well, as looking forward rather than just saying, okay, here, I'm 90% done. And I think we've all seen 90% done for 4 to 8 weeks beyond that.
No question. Absolutely. Dr. Malichi, you want to add?
Yeah, I would just add to both those answers were excellent. I start off with my number one tip is clearly defining the goal. And we see in project management, a lot of times the goals are not clearly defined, and what is the item? Why is the item such important to your company and to your company's bottom line? Each one of the experts alluded to time. Time is money, as Ben Franklin said. So a lot of times what we see missing out is that you have a start time and you have an end time. And I talked about milestones in between achieving those goals. Why are the deadline dates so important? Well, you have a desired outcome. You have a desired outcome you want to achieve. The deadline dates, what do? They create urgency. And Brad just said it, you have a 90% project, there's no urgency to complete it. It goes on and on and on, then board and start going different ways. So constraint is excellent. Automation that Ragnar spoke about, automating the process so that and everyone can do it. And then after you achieve your specific project, then you ask the question and you measure this in terms of a gap analysis. Was it cost effective for the company to do it?
Sounds good. Thank you for everyone's questions coming in. Keep them coming. Dr. Malichi, you mentioned the phrase time is money. Money is money as well. And that you mentioned kind of alluded to getting paid. And so there's a lot of aspects to that, right? Making sure that the project is scoped properly and the right price and cost is there, that delays are properly accounted for, and that ultimately there are checks that come in, whether it's across border or within the same country. Could you articulate a little bit more about how do we get paid for projects, especially complicated ones?
Thank you. That's the number one issue with most SMEs and even corporate America, is getting paid. And a lot of times, I've found this, believe it or not, a lot of companies don't like to ask for the paycheck or ask for, if it's an engagement, if it's a service company, you have an engagement, a consultancy, you have an engagement, you might want to get a retainer up front. When there's skin in the game, there's money on the table, company CEOs, CFOs, CIOs, all have a tendency to, senior project managers have a tendency to take the deal a little bit more seriously. What happens is, I said, time kills deals. So the longer that deal goes, the longer that project goes, the less probability you're going to get paid. And then when you get to the deal table to get paid, then you're going to have someone invariably is going to sabotage the deal. You will invariably have someone on your team or the other team will invariably sabotage the deal. So I think it's very clear to establish up front what the payment parameters are, how you're going to go about it, what those milestones are. And if they're not willing to do that, ladies and gentlemen, don't waste your time, because you're going to waste your money. Because you could be talking to someone. This has happened to us in 38 years of business. It's happened to us. We think we're talking to the CEO. We think we're talking to the principal. We think we're talking to the mandate. We think we're talking to the decision maker. And actually, we are not. So you waste a lot of time. And so it's difficult to get paid. You do the project, and there are legal battles, there's cultural battles, there's geopolitical battles, and there's all kinds of things go into it. And then you can get your money wired to your account. We've had this happen, money can disappear from your account. So we have a model of Malichi Group Worldwide, is that we deal only with the person who can write the check that clears the bank. If we're not dealing with that person, we don't enter into the project or the deal. It's that simple.
Okay, because that's more complicated. The whole process is more complicated when you're dealing, in Kazakhstan and you're in Canada or the US, or so, because you're not necessarily there. So are there steps you need to take to actually go there, or like how do you fully assure that you find the right person? Because sometimes it's unclear, right?
It is, and if I may, and this is not a commercial, but if I may, we do what's called a trade benefit survey. And in this benefit survey, we have a series of specific questions that we have to have answered that are performance value to us. And we're hoping that the client we're talking to, the company we're talking to in that country has a value proposition that meets our performance value. So we have a list of questions through our trade benefit survey that flushes these out. You can do these internally, or you can have an expert or a practitioner, and make sure he or she is a practitioner that comes in-house and take you to a series of questions like this. Or you can do what we use our prep. Our prep, it's a detailed 12-page potential risk for export profitability gap analysis. And so with every client or potential client, we will go through that process before we go out now. And then we also use, and then you may do this well, it's called a CIS. That's a client information sheet. And that client information sheet, you really hone down in a foreign country who you're dealing with, and it asks for specific information, banking information, financial information, some legal information, accounting information, to know that you're indeed fact talking with that person in that country. This is what I meant by a fail-safe strategy.
So you are truly the king of acronyms and the king of project management. Thank you. Great thoughts there. Anybody doing project management has run into these issues on payments. Brad or Ragnar, would you like to deal with that topic? Anything to add?
No, I agree with most of what Dr. Malichi said. Okay.
Very good. Brad, I would imagine the project definition helps define, the steps that you get paid, and there's some additional work, as Dr. Malichi talked about, in terms of kind of assuring you're at the right spot with the check writer all the way through the process.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. And, again, when I talk about full kit, you want to have the project scope fully kitted so everybody's aware. You wouldn't believe, and I'm sure the other two or anybody else involved with projects, you get the project team together, and frequently I'll come in. So what I'm saying is they have the same experience. I'll get the whole leaders of the projects in one room and say, okay, guys, what are we delivering? And I've got 8 leaders in there, and I'll just take them each up to a chunk of the whiteboard and say, specifically, what are we delivering? And I'll get 8 different answers. It's not uncommon for me to do that. And they're in the ballpark or everything else. But again, when it breaks down to, especially what Ragnar was talking about automating tasks and everything else, it's very difficult to do that when the firmware group is thinking they're developing something, and the software group's a different thing, and the test groups, we weren't even planning for this chunk of work coming at us. We didn't even know it was coming. And so, and frequently, a bigger problem exists as scope creep comes into the whole process too, and nobody realigns with the other leaders in the project. So it's really key to really have a strong definition and stay true to that, And if there's a change, get everybody together and say, guys, we're doing a change. Can we absorb it under the current budget, current timeline, current resources? If not, what do we have to do? And make a counter proposal to who's ever requesting the change.
Gotcha. Does that, for SMEs, sometimes a project might be run by a smaller team, and so if you're the project leader for that team, how do you might be doing tasks and be the project leader. How do you communicate that, and how do you use that kind of different hat scenario with the different people? And is that possible, or do you recommend that the project leader must kind of stay as the admin and really just kind of focus in on the payment side of it?
Well, again, getting away from the payment side, I certainly think that you've got to be able to separate yourself on when you managing the project, which includes everything, the people, the technical aspects of it, the budget of it, and managing, what the delivery is so you do get paid. I haven't worked so much with project managers or involved with the payment system, or how they're actually going to get paid. That's usually with the sales side. And certainly we can all talk about that problem, right? Sales just came in with a great project for us. Great, what is it? And they give us a one-liner like, okay, well, we can interpret that 1,000 things. And you just sold a Cadillac for about $5,000 here, fella. So we've got to go back and forth and do these things. So I think it's incumbent on the project manager to stay in tune with the people who are interacting and managing the client expectations and the payment things. And obviously we've all worked on projects where you're with the government, where you get payment for performance. Those types of things. And obviously those add some really interesting bad habits into the organization because they're working towards a payment, not really to the delivery of the overall scope of the project.
Gotcha. Very good. So what for all three of you, if you're not able to answer a question and I move on to the next question, feel free to come back and capture an answer. There's another question that is, we talked about, particularly Ragnar talked about automation. What software would you recommend these days in terms of being the most effective, or what types are? Ragnar, you want to take that one first?
Sure. And just for full disclosure, our company manufactures software, and project management is one of our modules. So recognizing that this is not a selling venue, I will answer. There are a lot of tools available today, and some are easier and more flexible and easier to use and set up than others. And there's also an incredible price range. So, my immediate response would be ours, but again, it depends on the budget. And I see that Brad had responded to one of those questions in via some text, and it depends on what your organization's trying to achieve, and how much how much resources do you have? Microsoft Project, not to mention names, is a great tool. Project Server, like SAP and other solutions to operate your business are great. And I would say that there are some that are as good, less complicated, and a lot less expensive, and that are definitely feature rich. And I think Brad has a good response there. It depends on the goals of your company on what you need as far as a good software.
I would just add, an excellent Ragnar said, he's the expert on this, and he knows far more about this than I ever will. There's one out there, I won't say the name, but look into mapping. We use MAP, M-A-P. And MAP, there's maybe it's a company called Brain Technologies, might just start with MAP. Is a really good tool for project management. And you can develop your projects, and you have sub-projects all the way up to completion. So look at some of the MAP software.
Okay. Sounds good. Anything to add there, Brad?
No, I kind of answered while Dr. Malichi was talking about the payment scheme, since I had less to offer on that element. But I really do think, like Ragnar had said, it depends on what drives your business, how you get paid, and your budget. And, and I always think of the KISS method. There's a lot of software out there with a lot of features and a lot of price tag, but, it's already a complicated process in many aspects. You really don't need a complicated tool on top of it. So if you can keep it simple, and just make sure you're driving to what drives what's going on in your organizations or what drives you to accomplish what the market is asking from you, then the simplest form is always the best.
Okay. Is there a current best practice theory of constraint software out there?
Again, there's four I'm aware of. One's a Cadillac, and the price is a little bit higher than the rest. If you want me to name a few, I can. And for those in international, Being is a company in Japan that makes it Japanese based. They also make an English base, so it can come to North America and other places that will speak English. But Realization has Concerto software, which has all of the bells and whistles, project-to-project links, sub-project networks. I mean, it has everything. And, again, that may not be required for most organizations. And then there's some, in the cloud solutions like Exapron, and I think Lynx is a software out of Europe. And so, I mean, there's quite a few out there that, and a lot of these are nice in the fact that they'll go into and plug into what you currently have and still create the buffer, create some of the reports and some of the other things. But I'll be honest with you, we've had tremendous success just using whipboards and exporting that to Jira and Trello. And when you've got a bottleneck in the organization and all they're working on is projects, we can set up a whipboard and just, again, full kit, focus and finish, full kit, focus and finish, and start removing bottlenecks out of the organization just using something as simple as a paper whipboard. So it just really depends on where your constraint is and what you're trying to achieve.
Oh, that sounds good. That question was from Indira Jeffrey, who is part of the team who's building out our Guanajuato, Mexico chapter. So thank you, Indira, for your question. The next question is from Jen, and that's the only information that I have. The current international trade environment is creating a great deal of uncertainty. What are project management best practices that companies can use to quickly adapt to these changes? For example, remaining up to date on changing tariffs and regulations, shifting supply chains to other countries, etc. Dr. Malichi, you deal with that every day, don't you?
I'll start off with that, and I'm going to try to be as Brad says, use constraint as I possibly can. We live in a very tumultuous, turbulent trade times right now. In terms of transparency, I serve on the White House Business Council, and I'm also the vice chairman of the U.S. Foreign Commercial Service, U.S. Department of Commerce, Indiana District Export Council. Doug himself is a vice chair with that council as well. I've had the honor to work on probably 80% of our free trade agreements here in the U.S. as an SME global leader and advocate, including up through TPP. I will tell you that I was upset when TPP was ripped up. I happened to work on that as I did NAFTA 25 years ago, and the current one. And I was the guy, if you may have heard back in Indianapolis, Indiana, and this was all over the world, about a corporation here called Cartier Corporation. Well, I was the guy that went in on live TV, ABC, into a live union hall that day where the announcement was made, we're going to send our employees we're going to cut back, eliminate, and move our company to Mexico. So I went in only to spend 5 or 10 minutes. It was live ABC TV. I ended up staying about 1 hour and 5 minutes to defend free trade agreements. Free trade agreements today are under attack. Moving this country to do bilateral agreements. I'm not sure that will sustain itself. I think multilateral trade agreements is still the way to go. I think you have to have someone designated within your company, if it's not the CEO or yourself as a senior project manager, to stay abreast of current trends happening in trade. There's some things you can go to get that information. There's federal websites. I can give you one that'll keep you up. One's called USTR.gov. That's US Trade Representative.gov. They have current trade information, different things that are happening, can give you some insight and advice. There's several organizations. HSBC Bank has an outstanding program they use for you don't necessarily have to be a customer as we are, but they have programs to keep you up to date on what's trending in trade, and just immerse yourself in activities. If there's in your town or city, someone speaking on global trade issues, we can get a little more specific in those what issues may be. You might go and just listen, but keep this in mind. When you hear these things on television, and I know it seems like they're saying it for a long period of time, they'll say something like, the trade war from China will continue to exist, negotiations are ongoing, and the tariffs will be impacting the rest of the nation for the next 2 or 3 months. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that's about a 10 to 15 second sound bite. But in real time, you're thinking that reporter on television that spent about 30 minutes talking about it, then they go on to other news. You see the difference? So you're going to have to open your ears up a little bit more and use discernment. I call the power of discernment, and listen to different issues. Listen to a lot of things are coming at you. But I'm an insatiable reader. I try to keep up on things and then see how those industries indices affect our businesses or our clients that we do business with. But I am a firm believer that one thing that I do thank our president for in this country is that, and many of you may know this as well, for a long time, I'm here in Indianapolis, Indiana, for 25 plus years, now 30 years in trade. I didn't get much love talking about trade. It was not a hot topic. We were doing free trade agreements, and no one really talking about free trade agreements. I'm happy to report all that's changed in our great city and our great state. But one thing that President Trump has done for me personally and for my firm and perhaps yours is that no matter where I go at now in Indiana, no matter how small the town, the county, or any place in America, around the world, I don't have to spend an hour and a half now talking about trade issues now that affects our business. Everybody now has it at the top of mind.
Gotcha. Absolutely. So I think that's a great way to cap that conversation off. That question actually was from Jen Pearl at the Indianapolis Chamber. So I know you know Jen. So that was very appropriate. Given that Dr. Malichi is the expert on that, we've only just got a couple minutes. I do have a question I think that all of you maybe is a good way to wrap it up. And this is from, I don't see the name, but I presume it's from WCC International in Washington, D.C. What do you think about the application of project management theories and practices to public-private projects where a foreign government or state-owned enterprise is a party?
I'm for them.
Okay.
Me too, Brad.
You're all for it. So you're.
I think for me, from a process standpoint, I always love building a robust process, because if there's something wrong with the process, you can change it and make sure it's changed globally, because we've changed the process. So if this helps drive cooperation across these organizations and all these other things, I think it's imperative to use project management thinking and theories and working together to help drive a more global community.
Gotcha. Okay. Ragnar, I bet you've probably had to deal with that as well.
Yep, and I agree exactly with what Brad said. There's, at the end of the day, we're all trying to be on the same team. We all don't always recognize that, but project can bring that into a better focus sometimes.
Yeah, when a group of people, disparate group of people from different countries can achieve something bigger than any one person, it really kind of goes to probably why many of us are involved with international activities and business. Anybody have any final thoughts before we adjourn? And if not, I would like to build.
I'd like to say just one thing, if I could, Doug. And thank you, Doug, and the Global Chamber for having Brad and Ragnar on. I've learned a lot from them during this session, and I've been around a little bit. And so thank you for the opportunity to share for these few moments some of our techniques, ideals, and thoughts. One thing I'd like everybody to remember about trade, and we say this in our talks around the world, no matter where we are, and I use the analogy or metaphor of an elephant, and then use this on your project management and your deals. I use a gestation period of an elephant. It takes for a baby elephant to be born, it takes 24 months, 2 years. So trade is a contact sport. Doing trade projects is a contact sport. It's no place for the faint-hearted. And know they can take up to 2 years or sometimes longer, sometimes shorter to complete that transaction, complete that process. So don't get frustrated. Don't get down and out. Just know that if your objectives are clearly defined and you work towards those in a step-by-step process, as each of those gentlemen has Brad and Ragnar has said and automate, you will get there.
Yeah, all three of you really have stressed the preparation, right? To define the project and to get all of the stuff done before you make any commitments and move forward. And that actually, I hadn't seen the analogy, but Dr. Malichi, I think there's a lot to say about just international trade, period, with that, right? A lot of cultural understanding, a lot of fundamentals that need to happen for you to be really successful. So
absolutely.
Thank you for allowing us to see that connection. I also wanted to mention add to what you said about keeping up on trade. Certainly anybody on this panel, anybody at Global Chamber, send your comments or questions, or if you're struggling with anything, to info@globalchamber.org. A couple weeks ago, we had a presentation from exporters about trade, and that's actually going to go up on the blog today. And one of the speakers there was Dan Ujo of Dickinson Wright, which is, he's in actually Columbus, Ohio, but the firm is in Cleveland and in Detroit and mainly in the Midwest, but around the U.S. And he's really a preeminent expert on whether it's NAFTA, USMCA conversion, or other trade deals. And so I encourage you to jump on the blog later today or tomorrow. And then this presentation, this event will be, if you missed the beginning part of it or you want to send it to some folks for them to watch it, this should be up online in 10 days to 2 weeks. Thank you all for your time. Our next Globinar, we actually have 2 Globinars on the 12th and 13th, 2 different ones. I encourage you to check our calendar at globalchamber.org. Thank you, gentlemen, for a great conversation and great insights. And if anyone's listening out there, again, if you have any questions and can't get a hold of these 3 folks, info@globalchamber.org will get you there. Thank you, everybody. Have a great one day.
Thank you.
Thank you.